You ever hear your own mother scream and not know if she's been attacked, had a heart attack, or worse, only to run outside and find her sitting behind the wheel of her car, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping her in this world? That's how it started. I had a plate of ribs in one hand, fresh off the grill, and the next thing I knew, they were on the ground, the gravel beneath my boots crunching with a new kind of tension. Her car was tilted, front tire completely shredded, sparks still dancing beneath the rim where it had dragged over metal. And that's when I saw them rusted spike strips, jagged and deliberate, buried right where our shared driveway met the curb. Not loose, not accidental, bolted in like a military barricade. And standing 10 feet away, arms smugly crossed over a pastel sweater set, was Marlene Beckett, our HOA tyrant-in-chief, newly minted resident of the house next door and self-appointed guardian of all things neighborhood appropriate. She didn't say a word. She just smiled. And right then, I knew this woman hadn't moved in looking for community. She came looking for control. What she didn't know was that in exactly 10 days, the governor's motorcade was scheduled to roll down that very driveway for a private veterans event hosted in my backyard. And she'd just turned that driveway into a landmine. It hadn't always been like this. A few months back, Marlene was just a name on a pending sale sign next door. That house had been empty for years, used by an older gentleman who spent most of his time in Florida and let the grass grow a little too tall. But he was polite, quiet, waved once in a while. We coexisted in peace. When Marlene moved in, she came bearing welcome cookies and a 10-page document she titled Guidelines for Harmonious Community Living, printed on pastel pink paper with smiley faces in each corner. That should have been my first red flag. She introduced herself as a compliance-minded citizen and took it upon herself to remind each neighbor of their shared obligation to uphold beauty and order, which I assumed meant don't leave trash cans out too long. Instead, within days, she was chalking red lines along the edge of our shared driveway and leaving handwritten notes taped to my mailbox that read, "Your vehicle encroached by 7 inches. Please respect the line." Now for context, that driveway had always been wide-eyed, had been designed that way, decades ago, to accommodate 2 households side by side. The previous owner and I had a gentleman's agreement. No drama, mutual use, no one claimed exclusive rights. But Marlene wasn't interested in history or common sense. She wanted her half, her line, and her rules. When I tried to talk to her, explain that delivery trucks sometimes needed the space, or that my elderly mother occasionally parked close because her hip wasn't what it used to, Besh cut me off mid-sentence. "Your guests are not my responsibility," she snapped and slammed the door so hard it shook the window on my side of the house. A week later, my wheelbarrow disappeared. When I found it again, it was sitting at the edge of her lawn, filled with decorative rocks and spray painted with the word private. It only got worse. Packages went missing. My sprinklers mysteriously malfunctioned. And then came the drone incident. I was using a small quad to check my gutters, something I'd done every spring since I bought the house, and she came running out, shrieking about airspace violations and government surveillance. She actually called the police. When the officer arrived, he gave me a tired look and said, "Sir, your neighbor seems passionate." Passionate. That's one word for it. Then came the spike strip. That day, I'd invited my mom over for lunch and to help test the new propane grill. She pulled into the driveway like she always had. Seconds later, boom. Tire gone. Rim scraping. Her face pale. My blood boiling. I pointed at the spikes and shouted, "You did this." Marlene looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Maybe if people stayed on their side, their cars wouldn't suffer." That's when I called the cops. The officer who showed up squatted down, ran his hand over the spikes, and muttered, "What the hell is wrong with people?" But then he stood up, shrugged, and said, "Technically, the driveway straddles 2 properties. If there's no clear boundary and it's not on public land, this might be a civil issue." So now I was stuck. I had a destroyed tire, a traumatized mother, a malicious neighbor, and apparently no legal ground yet. But here's the thing about people like Marlene. They don't want justice. They want chaos they can control. They want you to lose it so they can point and say, "See? I told you he was unstable." I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Instead, I got quiet. I reviewed my security footage, motion-triggered camera, angled just right from the garage. There she was. The night before, gloves on, flashlight in her teeth, kneeling with a power drill, bolting metal into gravel like she was setting a trap in a spy movie. I made 5 copies of that footage. Then I made a phone call. See, back in college, my roommate, Jay, had gone into law enforcement. We hadn't talked much in recent years, but I knew he was with the state patrol now. He picked up, and after the initial surprise, I asked if he knew anything about dealing with driveway sabotage. There was a long pause on the line. You still live at that place on Valley Ridge? He asked. Yeah, I said. Why? Okay, this is hush-hush, but we've got a private vet outreach with the governor scheduled at your place. Next Saturday. Backyard ceremony. Small, quiet. It's already cleared. You're on the list. Don't say anything yet, but yeah, that's happening. My backyard. The governor. Veterans. State security. And a spike trap. Suddenly, this wasn't just personal. This was official. And Marlene had just unknowingly laid an illegal obstruction directly in the path of the governor's motorcade. I didn't remove the spikes. Not yet. Instead, I installed 2 more cameras. Marked the danger zone with subtle flags. Informed Jay's team of a possible obstruction. Then I waited. Meanwhile, Marlene escalated. She started placing traffic cones across her half of the driveway. Claimed pending deliveries. None ever came. Every time I moved one, it reappeared within the hour. She'd even begun signing fake notices acting like she was part of the HOA board's compliance task force, which didn't even exist. One poor widow down the street got a letter warning her to adjust her mailbox to face true north. And then, on the Thursday before the event, she crossed the line again. I caught her crouched in my driveway with a tape measure and a printout from Google Earth. She waved it at me and said, "You've exceeded your property limit by 6 inches. I have the satellite data." She'd drawn crayon circles on a satellite photo. Crayon. I didn't say a word. Just stared at her until she scurried back to her porch. Saturday arrived. The morning was calm. I stood in my garage, pretending to adjust a tray of coffee dispensers while my heart hammered in my chest. At exactly 9:02 a.m., the first black SUV appeared. The governor's motorcade, rolling right toward the trap. I watched from a distance as the second vehicle's tire hit the spikes. There was a pop, a hiss, then a slow, stuttering stop. Agents swarmed. Radios clicked. A perimeter was formed. And Marlene? She walked right up to them like she was welcoming guests to a garden tour. "Is there a problem?" she chirped. "Would you like water bottles?" One agent asked if she lived adjacent to the driveway. "Why, yes," she said proudly. "I have full jurisdiction over that gravel." Right then, I stepped forward with my tablet, tapped play, and let the footage roll. Marlene, drilling metal into the ground, time-stamped and in full color. You could feel the mood shift. The agent took the tablet and walked it straight to the governor's car. A few minutes later, the governor himself stepped out, shook my hand, thanked me for the hospitality, glanced at the spikes, and then turned to Marlene and said, "Ma'am, I need you to remain here while we investigate this obstruction." She turned pale, tried to speak, thought better of it, took one step back. The ceremony still went on. Veterans honored, words spoken, flags raised. But the driveway, that was the real battlefield. Later that day, Marlene received a formal notice from the state's legal office. Investigations were underway. Local reporters picked up the story. The video went viral. A meme appeared, her holding a drill with the caption, "Protector of the Gravel Realm." A local teen remixed her HOA rants into a dance track. The HOA, silent for years, finally issued a statement. Marlene Beckett was never authorized to represent this board. Petitions followed. Lawsuits were filed. And 1 week later, she vanished escorted by 2 men in plain clothes. One suitcase. No goodbye. I repaved the driveway. Planted sunflowers. The neighbors started waving again. And at our next block party, we toasted with lemonade and grilled corn. Someone handed me a trophy, an old spike strip glued to a dollhouse drill. They called it the Karen Cup. I laughed harder than I had in months. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor like Marlene or seen what happens when one person's obsession with control endangers the people around them, drop your story in the comments. Let's talk about community, power, and what happens when someone takes HOA authority a little too far. And hey, maybe keep a camera pointed at your driveway, just in case.